made it.
Yes. Welcome, Selena. Welcome, everybody. We will have a very nice chat regarding Mozilla. It was very inspiring talk you had, but I'm very, very curious about some features of Mozilla, and I will dive right in. But everybody in the audience can use the chat or the Q&A tabs to actually ask questions, and I will forward them to Selena. My first question would be, please tell me more about the awesome bar or the suggest function in the awesome bar. How do you envision it? As a kind of Mozilla assistant based on algorithms, or should the Mozilla community play a bigger role in developing this function?
Yeah, it's a great question. So there's a few aspects of this. Like we're like just in the beginning, so it's going to be some time, I think, before we really like get our arms all the way around like what it ultimately is going to be. But I think the first like place to like think about is the awesome bar and what it has been to date, and there's an algorithm built into the awesome bar that as you're like browsing around on the web, and this is just all data that's like local to your computer, it doesn't go to any servers or anything, it kind of looks at the browsing history that you have like in the browser, and it tries to make suggestions like as you're typing. And for those of us like I'll just admit, like I'm a 1,000 tab user, and so I got a lot going on, and so that awesome bar is actually so helpful to me, right, to quickly like get back to things that I was working on, and I'm hopping in and out of windows and tabs, I was just doing a lot all the time. So we for many years had worked on that algorithm that makes those suggestions into your history, and we call that the frequency algorithm. Because I got to make up words, but anyway, it's a really cool feature. Not everybody's even aware that it's there, and so one of the first steps that we did here was think about, okay, how could we like do a little bit better job like educating people about something that's like right in the browser today and like works great. So that was our first step of just like making that history capability, like highlighting it and helping people understand a little more about it. So then the next step was like, could we also start to figure out how to make suggestions for places for people to go like on the internet? Because something, again, the users told us this, like in the research, like something that they brought up was just like information overload. How do I like find the next place? Like, how do I get back to places? This is very common refrain. So we started doing that. And our first just experiment basically that we're doing right now is looking at suggestions from Wikipedia. And there's like a fixed list that we have like put into the browser, and also some suggestions for like eBay and Amazon. And so like that's it. Yeah, and so from that, we're going to just build up our knowledge about like what do people actually find useful, and that so anyway, so that's the very beginning right now. And looking forward, I would love to have community involvement. I talked about this a little bit in one of the interviews I did recently. My vision for the internet is one where we have lots of different communities that are contributing to like a vibrant ecosystem, on the internet. This is really like hard stuff to do. Like we kind of know like the state of the internet's like a little bit rough, on social media, but I do think that there's like a possibility here. And some of the projects that I've seen people work on, like there's this thing called Front Porch Forum. And by the way, I would love to hear like other projects that people hear about like this, because I think there's so many examples that we need to learn from. But this is a social media platform that is an alternative to Nextdoor. And the two principles behind it are, first of all the posts are delayed by 24 hours.
Wow.
and every post, and every post is from a paid moderator. It's such a different perspective on like how to create a healthy community, right? And so that's like, those are the kinds of things that I am taking as input as we think about like how can we create like a really great community around something like Suggest.
It's strictly related to this because you could ask yourself, how can Mozilla become more local, especially if it tries to grow on mobile? where you still have a lot of potential to say it, at least. So how can you become more local, not only through algorithms, but to actually using existing communities or tapping into them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few things on that. One piece of it is like very careful use of data, to help route things, like that's like one piece of it, which is a very complicated topic and something that we're just like starting to kind of figure out. But I think that is key, like figuring out like, what do we believe about that? Like, what do we believe about using people's data to get them local information? And that's something we're definitely exploring. And then another piece of it are programs like our Mozilla reps. So we have had like, these amazing community programs with local community leaders who kind of drive their own agendas and what's most important to them in their local communities. And then, we have basically like councils that like come together and kind of talk about. This has all been really tough in the pandemic, by the way, but normally we would like get everybody together and like we'd like meet in person and kind of have that time together as a community. Instead, it's kind of happening like this. But anyway, I think that's like a piece too. And we have this long history of working, across continents, and over the internet with people who are just kind of united by a common purpose. And that's like amazing. I think we are uniquely positioned actually to not necessarily like become like an enormous company, but to be an enabler, of local communities as much as possible. So that's kind of like the direction that I see and that I would like to see. And, and other companies are going to take different approaches. Right. And I think that I honestly like, then there's some like good and some bad that comes from that. Right. But I think it's like, it's pretty healthy to have like multiple different approaches to exploring the space. And I think that, I think it's a good time for Mozilla to try to figure this out.
Yeah, I'm happy that you are considering it at least, because enabling communities could solve the problem of divisivity. And I would like also to put another questions. Browsers are the main gatekeepers or the main window that we use to actually find information and structure it. Are human curators really the answer to this information and low quality content? Because this is what we are seeing right now: low quality content, divisive content, fake news, outrageous content. Everything is pushed up, and quality content, healthy things are pushed down. So should browsers involve themselves in this battle that is currently raging on with not so happy results on the social media scene?
Yeah, it's going to be this is a incredibly important question right now, right? And so on the browser specifically, the browser itself, I think that there's like an important distinction between which, and I'll just like admit, like there are a lot of people who use the browser who actually don't really understand the difference between a browser and like a search engine, right? Like they don't understand the difference between even a browser and like social media. They don't necessarily. So I just want to acknowledge that, and there are many of us that do, right? So it's like both things are true. So in terms of what Firefox itself does, I think that there are some boundaries, around what the browser itself should and can do. But are there services? Are there services that we should add? And this is what we're exploring. One thing that I didn't mention is just pretty important about the suggest experience. This is just like my frame of reference. We're just focused on different things, and so I sometimes forget. But anyway, so the Firefox suggest experience that involves server-side communication, it's opt-in. And this is like a very different approach, to providing these types of services than many other companies, choose than what they choose to do. And so we're choosing to do that because we really believe that if people want and need these services and they're good, that they will choose them, and then, we also have an obligation to be like ethical, but like our first step, is to create like a good quality service that people will want to use. So I think that's a part of it. I think that browsers, like people who work on browsers, have some very specialized knowledge about what the internet, like how the internet works. And yeah, I do think that like we as like a group should apply some of that knowledge to make the internet better in these very specific ways. Like that last slide in my talk was from an addendum that we've made to the original like 10 Mozilla principles. And that addendum speaks more directly to the problems that the internet faces today, as opposed to the problems that it faced 20 years ago. And those problems today, like they really do, they have to do with misinformation. They have to do with people being confused and maybe just struggling to understand like what's happening, on the internet. And so I think that what we want to do is come up with a way to not only bring together communities and make that experience locally feel good for people, right? Like not feel like it's just like a big tech company from America, like, doing something to you, let us like take control of this. Let's like change this internet to be better for us. And no matter where you are. And that is like a big, like, big vision, it doesn't happen overnight, but that's what I feel, in my bones, and why I love working where I work. This is the thing that we need to work on. And this is the impact that I want to have on the world. Right.
Okay. I have several questions from the audience. The first is from Irina Sandu, not Mozilla related, but can you please repeat the name of the book that was recommended to one of your engineers? Because she didn't catch it.
Yeah, it's Exhalation. It's by Ted Chiang. I think I have it on my shelf, actually. I should have brought it over here, but anyway. Yeah, it's a book of short stories. And the first story is just like, it's a mind bender, but it's so good. It's so interesting. It's about time travel and just kind of unintended consequences. But anyway, yeah, it's a really great book.
Perfect. The second is, did you start using Mozilla once you started working there, or it was your favorite browser from even before?
Great question. It was my favorite browser before. And like I started, like I was first introduced to the internet through Mosaic browser. That's how old I am. I'm old. And
I can remember it. So yeah.
Yeah, you remember Mosaic? Yeah. And I use Netscape and I use Firefox, so yeah. So I was a fan from way back. My background is in open source software. So I kind of have like I worked on Postgres for about a decade and was part of that community, and it was wonderful. And so, being able to work at Mozilla is kind of a dream job, like to get paid to work on open source software is like amazing. So cool.
Another question from the audience. Don't you think that Brave stole the privacy browser that Firefox wanted to be?
No. Wow. How can you steal? Like, no. And I think like, first of all, much respect, like to Brave. They've done a great job. And Brendan is like, he's like master of the hustle. He's like, he's out there, he's working it every day. And I have a lot of respect for what they're doing. And I think that, there's like different approaches. There are choices that they made. And I think it's really interesting, the experiments around like micropayments and like where that leads. I think for us, there's like some skepticism like in inside of Mozilla as to whether like micropayments was going to be an effective alternative. But I think that it's really important for there to be diversity in the browser world, like no matter what. and some of the choices they make might be a little different than ours, and that's just because we have different goals. And I think that that's like, that's an important thing to exist in the world.
One more question from me is rather an obvious question, but I have to put it because, especially in Romania, it's very important. Why should tech companies hire more women, and especially in decision-making positions?
Oh man. Well, I think it's the right thing to do is like the first. Yeah. And like when I started at Mozilla 9 years ago, I was lucky enough to have a boss that was a woman. Her name's Laura Thompson, and she is awesome. She works at Fastly now, and we're good buds. But there really weren't a lot of other women like in my organization. And, over the last 9 years, it's really changed. Like I have a ton of women in my management team. I have, we have women who work in all parts of the company at a much greater percentage than we did before. But that's like, not universally true across tech. And I think that, it's not just the hiring piece. It's like you actually have to think about like, how am I running my company? This gets back to like what Andreas was saying about culture, and how the companies of the future need to operate. And there are things that might be happening in your company that really discourage women, and there's some things that we've done, for example, like things that every company should do, like being like really rigorous and fair about our evaluation processes, being rigorous and fair about how we pay people. Like we have a way of looking at the spread of salaries and making sure that they kind of like stay within reasonable bounds, so we're not like disproportionately underpaying like certain people, and not necessarily like even like saying that like you're underpaying women or not, but just like thinking about fairness, and equity, like across the entire organization. I think that that's like really the important thing that people need to focus on. And when you focus on those like fundamental values and you really think about like, how can I make this workplace like really great and fair and equitable and like a really wonderful experience for everyone that's here, I think that's like the path. And that's what I've seen, in my own work life and my own experience. And I've done that work in open source communities. I helped with the ADA initiative, which is working on getting, more women included in open source for many years. And, now I get to do it as a leader, in Mozilla. And it's such a valuable way to spend a little bit of time just like thinking about like, how can I make my company a great place for everybody to work, and then like working through and just like grinding it out, like make sure that like at every step of the way, like we're being fair and equitable. And I think that to me is like how we create great environments for everybody.
Let me say that I love the values that Mozilla is still sharing, and it's really sharing, and I really, really hope that you will grow, especially on mobile, because there is where everybody is. I know that you worked a lot on the desktop, but now you have the opportunity to do great things in everything that Mozilla does. So thank you very, very much, and I really hope that those values will be a part of the internet sooner rather than later, through Mozilla.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Thank you for everything. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.